It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview Randy Frame from the Outside the Chute podcast. How are you doing today?
Good, Brandon. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start a sports talk podcast?
Well, I actually didn't know that I wanted to start it until the pandemic hit, and I was working from home. And as I was working from home, and I started listening to different podcasts that are out there, and I'm a big I've grew up playing fast pitch, playing hockey. Those were my two main sports. So anyway, I got listened to. I shouldn't say I was listening to. I was searching for some softball podcasts to listen to. And I mean, the regulars were out there, like the 7 Innings podcast and the D1. And I was looking for, something for the men's game. So I got looking around. I was like, oh, wow, there's nothing really for the men's game out there. So I started doing my research, and I talked to my wife and said, what do you think about me starting a podcast on softball? And she was like, well, if you really want to do it, then go ahead, right? So I talked to a couple of my my good friends and teammates and asked them, do you think it's a good idea? And of course they were really encouraging for me to do it. Actually, one is Chris Hopewell, who is one of my co-hosts now. So anyway, I purchased the equipment, went out, got everything I needed, and on July 13th, I released my first podcast with Justin Schofield, who was actually one of the guys I talked to and see if he thought it was a good idea. He was a member of the Team Canada 40-man roster, and he's a big guy around here as far as the game goes. So to have his input was really valuable. So yeah, that's how it all came about, and it's been going really well.
How did you come up with the name of your podcast, Outside the Chute Fastpitch?
Actually, it's Outside the Chute. I should say that. It's so I got it from the chute is a pitcher's, if you're looking straight ahead, they're supposed to stay inside this imaginary line, right? So I came up with it when I was trying to come up with names. It was originally I was like, as a pitcher myself, I was like, illegal pitch or something like that. And I was like, wait a second. Back in 2018, when the Canadian Nationals were here in Nova Scotia, Justin Schofield, who I mentioned earlier, our first guest, he was getting called for being outside the chute, all the time. And I was like, that could be a pretty good name for a podcast. So that's how I came up with the name for the podcast.
Of course, with you being in Canada, what has it been like, obviously, interviewing Canadians?
It's actually been kind of surreal. When going back to when I started this, and I said, I was looking for men's fast pitch. At that time, I was like, why couldn't I do a podcast that has both men and women? And so, being able to talk to past players that I grew up watching, like Mike Pietnik and Colin Abbott and guys like that who are Hall of Famers. And that's been amazing. And then being able to talk to the girls from the Olympic team, it's actually been surreal. I'm just I played at Nationals, and I've traveled across North America to play, but I was never one of the the big wigs, sort of say, and to be able to sit down and talk the game with them, it's been amazing.
Of course, speaking about that, traveling the world and talking with those players on the softball teams that went to the Olympics, what was that like? Obviously, hearing their Olympic story and what that was like for them.
Unbelievable. I mean, first, talking to, as of right now, I've talked to everybody on the Canadian Olympic team except for two, Kelsey Harshman and Sarah Groenewegen. I'm actually going to be talking to Kelsey in a couple weeks. I still have Sarah Groenewegen left. So Sarah, if you hear this, come on. Being able to talk to them and hear what their journey has been, leading up to the Olympics, to the girls I talked to before the Olympics was pretty crazy, hearing all the sacrifices that they went through, for over the last 4 years, actually more than 4 years. It's been a long trek for them, but, getting them to share their stories and come on and tell us about it. It's been awesome. And then, fast forward to after the Olympics, and I've had a couple of the girls on after the Olympics and getting to hear their stories about how that went has been pretty cool as well.
What has it been like? Obviously, I know you interviewed Danielle Lawrence and other players in the Canadian team, of course, that have recently retired. What has that been like to hear their story from when they were playing to now, obviously, after retirement?
Oh, it's been awesome. I mean, you bring up Danielle Laurie, and I mean, she has been amazing for the game here in Canada. I mean, she's been to 2 Olympics, and the biggest thing I look back on for Dan is her to get that final strikeout for Team Canada to win the bronze medal this year. I mean, I know that was icing on the cake for her. Like that would be awesome. So, but I mean, getting to talk to them has been amazing.
Of course, what are some of your favorite memories and moments covering, obviously, softball?
Uh, really, it's been talking to. I'll split this into 2 things, I guess. Talking to the men, getting to talk to Hall of Famers. That is pretty cool to me. Getting to hear their stories about how big the game was back in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s. Getting to hear those stories. Playing at the ISCs and what the crowds were like and how big they were, all that stuff. That, I mean, I could listen to those stories all day. Like those are amazing to me. And then as far as the females go, talking to, like I said, all the girls from the Canadian Olympic team, and I've talked to girls from the Australian national team. I've talked to Taryn Mowat, who's won an ESPY award. I've talked to the legend Kat Osterman, who just recently retired. That was, if there's one interview, Kat Osterman was, as a pitcher myself, being able to talk to, one of the greatest of all time was absolutely surreal to me. I mean, as a podcaster yourself, I mean, talking to some of the professionals that you've talked to, I mean, you probably get a little nervous. Kat was one of those ones where I was like, wow, I'm actually talking to Kat Osterman right now. So that was pretty cool.
Of course, take me back to the Kat Osterman interview. And what was that like, obviously knowing that she was coming on and obviously getting her on there and talking with her?
Well, I originally threw a message out to her, and, I've thrown out messages to, different athletes out there to come on, and like I've sent a message to Jenny Finch. I've never heard back from Jenny, but I never expected to. It's just one of those ones, you throw a fishing line out there and you try to reel it in, so to speak. But I threw a message out to Kat, and it was probably about a month and a half, and she responded back saying, I'd love to come on. And when I got that message, I was like, what is going on right now? Like that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, okay, this might take the podcast up a little bit here. And I talked to her, and then like I said, getting to talk to her it was awesome.
Of course, what were some of your favorite memories and moments, obviously covering that interview and covering other interviews?
I think the one talking to Kat, talking about a perfect game that she had that she never knew she was throwing that perfect game. And, as a pitcher, that's one of those things where you're like, wow, that's how much in the zone she was, that she didn't know she was throwing a perfect game. And that's pretty cool. Other ones that I've interviewed, and, talking to Mark Smith, he's a local legend here in Nova Scotia. He was the head coach of the Canadian Olympic team. That was really special to me because I grew up watching Mark play, and he was absolutely dominant in the game, not only here in Nova Scotia, but across the world. So, getting to talk to Mark, that was pretty special as well.
How has obviously your podcast helped you in obviously your playing career as a pitcher?
I don't know exactly how it would help me, but I guess, the last couple of years having the podcast out, going into games where, guys now know who I am. I mean, that's, you kind of get a comfort level, pitching against guys that come up and talk to you, and, as opposed to not knowing them. I mean, that's pretty cool. But I wouldn't say there's been any real advantage about having the podcast and, going into pitching against somebody.
Of course, vice versa. How has your being a pitcher helped you with your podcast getting it started?
I'd say connections. I mean, when I started out, being able to have Justin Schofield on, like I said, as my first guest. He was part of the Team Canada 40-man roster, and, word of mouth through him got me other guests, 4, 5, 6 episodes in. And then from there, talking to them, it kind of snowballed, which, our men's game is a really tight knit community. It's a brotherhood, really. It is, once you play or play with someone, it's almost, you're friends for life. So, that's been that connection right there. It's been word of mouth. So, I mean, it's been pretty cool.
What are some of your future plans for your podcast?
Keep growing it. I mean, that's all we can do. Keep talking to, hopefully get that word out and have the likes of Jenny Finch come on. That would be awesome. But I don't know. It's more or less to promote the game. That's my biggest thing. It's all about promoting the game and getting it out there. And, if somebody listens to the podcast and is like, well, geez, I want to go out and watch this game of fast pitch, then, that's one more person out there watching it that, we helped along the way.
Who are some of your future potential interviews that you plan on having on besides obviously Jenny Finch?
Well, Jenny is a long shot. I would love to have Jenny on. I have Kelsey Harshman's coming on here in a couple of weeks from the Canadian Olympic team. We're going to be talking to Jeremy Spear in a couple of weeks. He is the maker of the Fastpitch movie. It's a documentary about the game from back in the 90s. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. I'll type in Fastpitch the movie, and you will see a side of the game from back in the day that you never knew existed. It's absolutely amazing. So I highly suggest anybody go on and check that video out.
What advice would you give people looking to start their own sports talk podcast?
I would say the biggest thing is do it for the love of it. I mean, I'm doing it for love. I actually didn't know that I loved it until I actually started doing it. So I guess that would be my advice, is do it because you love it. But it actually, it's a lot of work. I consider it a hobby, but it's a hobby that I absolutely love and just, have a joy doing it.
What advice would you give sports talk podcasts that are looking to obviously interview professional athletes such as you have and such have I have?
I would say throw as many messages out as you can, because you never know who is going to answer back. And like I said, with Kat Osterman, that was one of the big fish that, I threw the line out and was able to reel in. And I'm so grateful that she was able to come on and do it.
That's wonderful. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
They can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're on all, and it's all at Outside the Chute. If you type that in, we are on. That's and that Chute is CHUTE. So yeah, if you go on, make sure to give us a follow and all that good stuff.
Thank you again for your interview, and best of luck with your podcast, Outside the Chute.
Appreciate it, Brandon. Thanks so much for having me on.
You're welcome. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thanks, Brandon.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.